I mean, they tried everything and didn't really work. And LSU is a formidable opponent, to say the least. They faced them. Obviously, it's a rematch of last year's national title game, but she put on the show. And you're right. I don't know. I mean, if you're a technical basketball person and you're a basketball junkie like you are, I don't necessarily know if it appeals to you. It appeals because it is kind of the Caitlin Clark show at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, she is a kind of phenomenon into herself. She's just fun to watch. Not necessarily from a basketball perspective, but just watching her as she's just really kind of a pioneer of a different brand of basketball for basically has captivated the country for women, and it's taken women's basketball to a whole nother level. The ratings are higher for women's basketball than they've ever been. Like, this is the peak, the zenith of women's basketball right now. I hope they take advantage of it. I was doing some research. So how about this? I got these numbers just to kind of show they call it the Caitlin Clark effect. Call it whatever you want to. But women's basketball, the numbers have kind of shifted. The viewership is up we're talking about these Sweet 16 games on ESPN here, up 32% from last year. Despite the fact that last year's 4-game slate featured Iowa, LSU, those teams obviously were still in it at this point. It said also here, if you look at last year's NCAA women's basketball tournaments, the ratings hit historical highs. And they believe that Iowa and Caitlin Clark were a big part of that. The Hawkeyes' first 2 tournament games this season averaged 4.1 million viewers. 4.1, nearly 5 times last year's average, which also hit peaks. Also, if you go look at the 2 largest audiences ever for women's tournament games outside the Final Four, Iowa's narrow escape of West Virginia and their opening round blowout of Holy Cross averaged 3.2 million and 4.9 million viewers. Just to give you perspective on that, which how wild that is, I believe NBA playoff games on average get you about 5.5 to 6 million viewers. Like, this on average. Now it's not the big time games. It's not when LeBron's playing or Steph's playing, but just on average in 2023, they was trying to average viewership. These are some monster ratings or monster viewership numbers for women's basketball. And like I said, a lot of it's being attributed to Caitlin Clark and her mass appeal.
Yeah. And I think there's something to be said of, I think that this is something that people are having a little bit easier time watching with their families, where you can sit down and tune into this, where it's a sporting event where, we kind of saw it somewhat with the Chiefs and Taylor Swift of, okay, well, we can sit down and all watch this as a family, as opposed to maybe just dad or mom or whoever just watching the game by themselves, kind of bringing in everybody in the family and watch them together. I think that's helped them out. But it is, I mean, people want to see generational talents. At the end of the day, that's something that people always want to see. And when you see Caitlin Clark play, just if you watch points of the first half to points of the second half, where in the first half they were really starting to slow her down a lot more. And it looked like, okay, I don't know if she's going to be able to step up into the moment. And by the second half, it was
third quarter.
Yeah, it was blatantly obvious that she could step into the moment and be a star player. I don't know at halftime what it was exactly said, but I believe that she made the point that she was going to come out and be a force in the second half, and they just had no answer. And so it's fun to watch people like that, especially if you don't necessarily have, any skins in the game. If you're not watching and your team's not in it, you're not necessarily overly mad. I don't know if there's a dislike for a ton of those teams where, an Iowa team, it really wasn't a powerhouse before Caitlin Clark. That's also kind of what's fun about this year's Final Four is you got to see a USC and an Iowa that I know I was in the championship game last year, but without Caitlin Clark, this has not been a powerhouse team. Yeah, exactly. And without Juju Watkins on USC, that has not been a powerhouse women's basketball team either. Normally you see South Carolina's and UConn's, LSU has been really good. Baylor was good when Mulkey was there as well. So you kind of see the same teams in there every year. So there's been a little bit of new blood in there as well, which I think people enjoy seeing. So there's a lot of factors. But at the end of the day, as much as I think LSU and Angel Reese got to play the foil to it, it is really about Caitlin Clark and her generational talent. But, I mean, watching Angel Reese, there was a period right before the first half ended where she had like 9 or 10 points in a row.
Oh yeah,
and was
yeah.
just making
She
steals,
could
making
take over.
blocks, and was just using her
Mhm.
size and athleticism to be able to take the game over. And so you saw it on both ends where there was that worthy foil. And again, the game was not as close as the score was at the end of that game.
No.
They basically, it was down to free throws. Iowa made some dumb turnovers. There was a three that Caitlin Clark fouled the shooter, and she hit the three and then missed the free throw, and then LSU got the rebound to put it back into a single digit game. But at the end of the day, in reality, it was just Caitlin Clark in that second half told you that she was not going to be beat.
It's amazing though that, because I agree with you about okay, well, she's a generational talent that helps, but I also think there's a confluence of
Yeah.
factors here that's really helping. Honestly, LSU being a villain helps.
Yeah.
It always helps to have a villain. The storyline writes itself here. And in a country that is, we are divided in a lot of ways, it helps because different sides, and I'm not going to get into all that. You can pick different sides. Hell, the White House was commenting on this last year, right? So whatever you like Iowa, you like LSU, whatever it is, it helps to have the villain, and then you can naturally have your hero, whoever it may be, because some people believe Caitlin Clark's a villain in their world, right? And they look at it, right? So that also helps. NIL is huge here. It's really I think pumping up women's sports. It's given a new vitality to women's sports now because they are valued in a different way in the NIL world than I think we have perceived before. So I think that's all. I mean, how many of those damn commercials had Caitlin Clark in if you were watching the game?
Yeah.
I mean, and she's got like 11, I think 12 NIL endorsements. She's got a ton of them. That I think that also helps with it. But it's interesting. And I know she's like you said, generational talent. I mean, she's in the conversation to be the GOAT, the greatest women's basketball player of all time. She's got to win a title though. She'll probably still be considered the GOAT in women's basketball if she doesn't win the title. But man, you talk about the cherry on top of the legacy.
Well, yeah,
to leave like that on top after winning, and then you'd have to take down the likes of UConn or something like that to do it. And by the way, that is also a storyline here. I want to get this in real quick because I know you got a great point that you always do have. Real quick, apparently, like all I imagine women's basketball stars coming out in high school, she wanted to be a UConn Husky. And apparently, like that was part of her dream coming up, that she wanted to play for the Huskies. And reported the Huskies never came calling. Here's an excerpt from a story about her. She said they said letters from college coaches stacked up at her house in those days when she was being recruited. Her parents kept them from her until late in the process, trying to instinctively protect her as much as they could. Her dream school, like everyone else, UConn. She was growing up and learning for the first time about being watched and about reputation. A lot of college coaches watch the same body language sequences that other coaches observed. Most didn't mind. They said she waited for Geno Smith and UConn to call, waited for a letter. Geno never came. There you go. So apparently she wanted to be a UConn Husky.
And for the
never
record,
happened. So add a storyline.
Yeah,
there.
Best thing that ever could have happened to her. Because if she goes to UConn, she doesn't have a green light. She's not allowed to shoot like she shoots. And maybe by her senior year, she gets a little bit more of a green light, but she's not the Caitlin Clark we know because that's not what UConn does. UConn is a very much fundamental basketball team. They like to do things the way that you're supposed to be because your odds of winning go up if you have 7 All-Americans. I mean, UConn does because UConn plays, I think, 5 players for 90% of the game. But if you have 5 All-Americans on your team and they all play fundamental basketball, you're going to win a lot of games. And that's what UConn's done. And I don't think they would say, okay, just take these off-balance three-pointers from 5 feet behind the three-point line. I don't know if that would be allowed for her to be doing for the last couple of years. So it's really good that didn't. But this is a UConn team where if you want to talk about the powerhouse basketball programs, we said that there's been this is the first year that 2 teams are in the women's and men's Final Four. It's the first time that's ever happened. But UConn has been it. UConn has done it, I believe, 4 or 5 times, and they've won both titles twice before in the same year. So this is not anything new for UConn. This is what they do at UConn. So this is, I think, if you want to say the storybook ending for a Caitlin Clark career, to be able to knock off this UConn team, that this is their 24th women's Final Four. Like, that is a
It's crazy.
ridiculous number. Just
Yeah, it's
what they've
ridiculous.
been able to put together. They were on the early edge of being able to put it, together as many All-Americans you could. There's, of course, Caitlin Clark wanted to go there because that was, if you went to UConn, you could win championships. And if you went anywhere else, you could play against UConn for the championship. And that was kind of what it felt like for a long time in women's basketball. But if she can knock them off, if she can, go prove herself at that she's a generational talent that took in Iowa that's never been that powerhouse team all the way against this team. And then you add in, the story. Everybody loves that story of they didn't see me and I'm proving them wrong, because everybody in their own lives feels they've been slighted at a point and someone didn't give them an opportunity. So we can all get on board with that, story. But at the same part, it'll be fun to watch if she can do this again, where the moment in the second half was not too big for her. And in the second half of that game against LSU, she became, once again, that generational talent that you don't know if you will ever see somebody in women's basketball do what she did at that level.
Yeah, nobody's going to play the game. Like, nobody has played the game like she has played it.
Yeah. And there's no one in line to do it next.
Yeah, it could happen now just because she's inspired now, probably a generation.
But there's no one that's sitting behind and say, well, that'll be the next Caitlin Clark. That is not a thing right
that'll
now.
be because she's, exactly like kind of how Steph has inspired a generation of players who just want to now take logo 3-pointers and they all believe they're Steph Curry.
But there's still no other Steph Curry, and he's in his 30s now. He's been around for a minute.
Amen. Amen to that, brother. Yeah, and I'm with you. I don't think there will be another Caitlin Clark in a long time. She is, captivated really sports fans and non-sports fans. She's kind of transitioned from the sports page to the front page. That's something that's really, really tough to do. And she's bringing women's basketball with her. We just talked about Ice Cube offering her $5 million to play in the Big 3 league. And we both agreed she should do it. We both agreed the WNBA should let her do it. There's only 2 games where it conflicts, and they should let her do it because it promotes the game. It promotes women's basketball. There are going to be some audiences that go watch the Big 3, but yes, those will also be audiences that are inspired to go watch more WNBA. I'm not saying I'm going to watch WNBA games because Caitlin Clark is playing, but I will say we probably talked more about women's basketball during the Caitlin Clark era than we ever have.
Did you hear Kenyon Martin? Did you hear Kenyon Martin on his opinion of Caitlin Clark in the Big 3?
Oh no, what did he say?
He said the Big 3 is a step away from prison ball. She can't be in there because they're just going to ISO her and post her up every single play.
It's prison ball. That's a great, man. That's fantastic.
He's like, you don't understand. These guys will not care that she is a girl. And like, they will just go, okay, I'm just going to post you up every time you try and guard me. I will elbow you in the head. I will push you out of the way. I'm physically bigger and stronger than you.
Dude, I think Battle of the Sexes also great storyline. I mean, come on, we watched that at the NBA 3-point contest, right? With Steph.
Yeah.
And the WNBA player, she was great. She's what's her name? I always screw it up.
It's Ionescu, I believe.
Ionescu. Yeah, I always mess it up. But it was really compelling. So I think this is kind of a play on the Battle of the Sexes thing. As long as you got a storyline around Caitlin Clark, I think people will watch. And I think that's what you don't want to lose. She goes to WNBA, she loses all the storylines, really. Right? A lot of all the storylines fall. Right now in college, storylines are good because you got villains that she's going up against, like LSU, and then you got UConn, as you described, taking down powerhouse dynastic program to add to her legacy. She's changing the game. You have all these things that are adding to it. And the Big 3, that's why I think go WNBA, but play in the Big 3 league. Do it. Even if for a few exhibition games.
Yeah.
Don't play a whole season if you don't want to. Play 2-3 games. Say, man, I'll give you 2-3 games.
Yeah.
All right. You pay me $1 million a game. All right, there you go. So you make it easy on it. Whatever it may be, if you don't want to play a whole season. But I think she should do it because I don't want the buzz to die for women's basketball.
Yeah.
And then it'll all die out with her pretty much going and being not irrelevant, but she won't have the storylines that are so captivating and compelling with her. Around her. All right. Yeah. Good conversation there. All right. We come back. We'll get into some of Texas football conversation. There are all these